Hello, this is pretty simple. We're going to go through every legendary in the game, starting with Lydia. We're basically going to go in the index top left to the bottom right, and this is going to be a very basic review of each hero. This is not a full guide on every hero. This is just, you pull a hero, you want to see a general idea of what they are and what they do. So Lydia is essentially a high DPS, single target, defense ignoring person with survivability based upon her passive, which allows her to dodge. Every time that she does dodge, she's going to respond with a high damage attack, and that high damage attack is going to ignore defense when she crits. For that reason, you want to build her 100% crit, and also her ultimate ability is effectively sort of the same thing, 200% damage with ignoring crit, and you can see that she, how to put it, she's RNG, because if she's below 50% health, she's going to have a bonus 40% dodge total, including the 20% you get just flat, and that will give you the counter attacks, which is where you get your DPS. So her damage can be RNG, but she can do very high single target damage and can also help you cheese some things, especially in the Endless Trials where you get more bonus dodge percentage. You can ramp her dodge like crazy, and she can basically be unkillable in Endless Trials. Moving on to Urian, he's recently been changed. He is a hero that is effectively sort of a one-shot hero. You're going to use his ultimate ability to do max damage in AoE. I do have this hero. Now, the reason that I like the AoE is because it gives you a bonus elemental advantage with the trait. So the trait effectively makes it where once per round, he can go on and get as if he's the right affinity against somebody. So water into fire, fire into wood, for instance, and he's going to get that 50% damage bonus because of that. Now, the AoE defense down, I have been doing some testing, and I'm not 100% on this, but from what I've seen, it looks like the defense down is actually applied after the damage, meaning that he doesn't defense down and then apply damage. So if you have, like, the defense down spell, for instance, doing that first would make you do more damage in total. He can steal positive effects and remove positive effect or negative effects from himself and do good damage on this move, and his basic attack has a chance to stun. So he is, in my opinion, really good for farming campaign, because you can just like one-shot basically any wave. You can just make him build him out because of the affinity bonus. He's also obviously good against the dark people, because he's also going to always have affinity bonus versus them, but they're also going to have affinity bonus versus him, okay? So I do actually think he could use a smaller buff. I think that maybe if they applied the defense down first, and again, I can misunderstand the way they did this, or with the, I did try testing this a bunch, but it does seem like it applies afterwards. I think there's something they could do to make him a little better. He's still quite good, though, for AoE damage. Now we're going to be going into the next faction here. Now, Goobeg. Goobeg is a hero I can't wait to use, but I really believe that in order for him to be used, he has to have his Ascension, which requires 5 duplicates of him, and basically he gets bonus turns back to back to back like he's in the 6. So if he constantly ramps his speed, meaning, you know, yes, it does count from glyphs. Yes, it counts from when you use the abilities that give you bonus speed. You can see grant speed, etc., has a chance to grant speed, etc., and he does poison, and his AoE is actually pretty insane damage. You look at 300% damage scales with his character's speed. So you can understand how this hero works. He basically just goes over and over and over again, and then you want him to constantly stack poisons, and then he has mass AoE damage too. I do think he is highly gear dependent, and will be a hero that more people will start showing builds with as they unlock him and get gear farm. Now, Hector is a hero that is essentially single target high DPS with a bonus turn mechanic. There is something you should understand about him, which is that this basic ability that applies damage up 2 only applies when he has both axes in his hand. If he has one axe, he gets damage up 1. If he has no axes, he doesn't get the damage up. Doesn't explain this very well here, and is actually, for that reason, a little bit annoying to use him, because you're going to throw both your axes, and then you're going to do your ult. You're going to get 2 turns, throw both your axes again, and then next turn, you're going to basic attack, and you're not going to have the damage up. So I think he would be significantly better if the damage up applied without the axes, because you basically are never basic attacking with the axes. You're just not, because you're always trying to get the bonus turns from his ultimate, which is better anyway, and you want to stack the increased damage taken. So the way the kit is designed is quite garbage, in my opinion. If they did it where the damage up was just all of the time, he would be way better, but he is still a very high tier single target red damage, which there isn't a lot of in the legendary. So now, Crazed Urzog is probably the hero I don't understand the most, if I'm going to be bluntly honest, and they just changed him, so I'm going to go through it here. Grants a stack of block up to 3 stacks when casting ability. Block reduces damage taken. Each attack removes the block. And if you have the Ascension, immediately grants the 3 stacks of block. So he gets a little tankier at the beginning. 100% damage to an enemy. Grants unhealable. Now, this one right here, the special, strikes all enemies 4 times, dealing 100% total damage. Each strike has a 30% chance to remove a positive effect. Once all your team has cast their abilities, you gain 1 rage. After accumulating 5 rage, you immediately cast this ability's bonus attack, can be used twice per round maximum. So essentially you get a move onto another move onto another move, and then you get all the turns for that round. So if you do have people, how to put it, if you do have people that are constantly doing their attacks, and I believe this does work when paired with joint attacks, like I'm thinking Imojin, for instance, is an ability. When she joint attacks, I could see this being quite good. And then his main ability is a single target damage nuke that increases the damage if they're below 50%. And when the skill kills the target, immediately casts a special ability bonus skill. So for that reason, you can see he kind of constantly gets bonus damage. My buddy Kyra Mobile has him, has used him, but hasn't said he's been particularly massively overwhelmed by him. Corrupt Ergoth is the guy I want more than anybody in the game. He is a person that is essentially deals around max HP and true damage, which is always a really good mechanic. You can see here, he's going to be effectively dealing true damage of this character's max health to all enemies. So you're going to build him on health, and he has S tier health, so you can see where that's good. Damage scales with with his max health once again on his basic. So again, you're going to build him tanky and still get damage, and then he grants max health to himself and recovers health. And then if you look at his ultimate ability, he removes all positive effects from an enemy, 100% damage to them, and silences them, and it scales with his max HP. Basically, you can build him tank, he's going to do a ton of damage, and he's just going to shut down a person instantly and also deal damage every turn, regardless of whether or not he's actually taking the turns, just at the start of the round. Really good hero, really good for the late game, I believe, as well. Okay. Moving on to the next faction here in Lazir, we have 4 legendaries here. We have Valerie. Valerie is essentially your AoE red DPS. It's a rookie starter hero, and she has good tier attack. You can see it's the S tier. What she does is she converts, look at this, consumes 20% of her current health, and then deals 180 damage to enemies, grants a bonus turn upon the defeat of an enemy. This used to say convert 20%, and people were confused by the ratio, but basically it's 180% damage but costs 20% of her health, and her A2 does 100% damage, but then recovers 35% of the damage dealt. So you can see the synergy there because she gets a bonus turn. So you use the move, get a bonus turn, go ahead, recover your health. And if you look at the way the passive works, reduces ability cooldowns upon the death of an enemy. So you can effectively just nuke, 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 nuke. It's a 4-turn cooldown. So if you kill 3 people with the nuke and then the bonus turn, you can do it again. Okay, that's where she's good. She applies defense down on the basic, which is always good, especially when paired with Hector. So you have the increased damage taken plus the defense down on like a wood hero. Lot of good damage, and is potentially one of the better rookie summon choices. Now, Darken Nicholas is kind of interesting because look at the passive, okay? Enters Dark Avatar State under 50% health, enhancing all the basic and ultimate abilities. And if you go to the basic and ultimate and you look, basically, he normally has 100% damage. Damage scales with the amount of health loss. So he gets stronger as he gets lower health. But the other one, when he goes into Dark Avatar, he hits multiple enemies on a basic, which is pretty good. 2 enemies. Now, the passive gives him 4 stacks of death immunity. 1 stack is removed for every subsequent attack taken. Can be triggered once per 6 rounds. So he gets 4 stacks of death immunity when at 1 health. Pretty good. Then the ultimate ability, 150% to 2 enemies, applies unhealable, and damage scales by health loss. So you can see kind of what keep him low. And then it goes to damage done to all enemies and applies unhealable. He's the reverse version of Nicholas, and we'll talk about him in a moment, because Nicholas, if you look, is effectively going to heal himself when he enters that light avatar state, and his light avatar state's actually paired to like the King's Will, which is not really an avatar state, it just replaces the ultimate ability. You can see here once he gets the death immunity, and then the ultimate ability basically converts his damage into health. It's still the same move, still spreads the attack evenly, and let me explain the attack evenly thing. So if you look, his passive works like this. He's always going to be the fastest person on your team, because he's the fastest person +1. That's the way his passive works. But then, because of that, when you use your ult, it's also distributing the attack evenly to all enemies. So what you do is go first, or all allies, I should say, go first, use your ult, and now all your allies are stronger before their turns happen. Then you can do like a wind strikes, attack up, speed up, and then your people go and nuke the people. So I think Sir Nick is actually sort of like a support in a weird way, like an offensive support, and I like him a lot. Now, Eve First On is going to be a hero that has been highly considered the best hero in the game. game. I'm not sure if I completely agree with that. I have her, but she might be. She gives and I could explain the other moves, which is she has defense down 2 here on a 3-turn cooldown. Defense down 2 is way better than defense down 1. It's 50% instead of 30. The basic attack removes a positive effect 100% of the time, and you get defense up for all team members for 3 rounds at the start of one. And yes, when she's ascended, it's defense up and attack up for 3 turns. And these are the basic versions, not the A2 version. However, the bonus turn to all allies at the end of the round is insane. Once everyone gets their turn, all of your allies get 1 more turn. This is crazy. And when paired with Windstreaks, it can make it where you get a bonus turn, everyone goes, Windstreak resets the alt, gets a bonus turn again. Okay, which means 12 turns in essentially 1 round. Insane combination. I have done this in some clan boss teams, okay? So for that reason, I still think Eve First Dawn's top 3 heroes in the entire game. Moving on to the Soul Plunderers here, we have Ciara, or Sierra, as people are going to pronounce her. If you look at the way she works, it's all about this move, which every time enemies are triggered under 50% health, she's going to do an AoE to all enemies, can be triggered once every 2 rounds, and that AoE is 100% damage. It's that simple. So basically, she's about nuking people or completing kills. Now, the passive's pretty cool. When she gets kills, she actually stacks attack, and this attack can be expelled in order to do bonus damage on her ultimate ability. So that's pretty good. Normally you disable the ult just so your AoE is stronger, and the basic's so good anyway because it increases damage taken, and normally you kind of want her to go first. So she's increasing damage taken, everyone else goes on the boss or whatever, and she can trigger her passive to follow up. I actually don't use her ultimate when I do use her on Ashe because I just want to do that increased damage taken, and I want the bonus stacks. Now, Baddon is a hero that was nerfed recently. You could do close to 1 million damage on clan boss with him. He was somebody that, if you look here, 250% damage to an enemy prolongs any stat reduction effects on the target by 1 turn. Okay, look at the A2. 120% damage to all enemies. While healing strength scales with the number of negative effects affecting the target. Look at the basic. 4 attacks against random enemies, each inflicting 30% damage and random stats down. Now, look at the passive. All attacks reduce all cooldowns by 1 turn per negative effect on the target. Attacks deal bonus 5% damage per negative effect on the target, and that will go to deal 10% bonus damage. However, this only prolongs stat reduction effects, not poisons, etc. Therefore, he's not as good as he used to be, but yes, he is still a single target DPS for bosses. Now, moving on to Ganglia, one of the most important heroes in the entire game, reason being this passive right here. If you have him ascended twice, 100% more damage from poisons, otherwise it's 50% more. You're effectively doubling your damage from poisons when you have him ascended, and this is going to make it significantly easier to make viable poison teams in all forms of dungeons, meaning Ashe, Queen, etc. Yes, he does apply poison on his basic. His A2 does heals to himself based upon poison, so he has some form of self-sustain, and he does do AoE poison as well as no positive effects here as well. He doesn't apply unhealable, so if you're thinking about doing Queen, maybe consider another unhealable like Gajar, but he is a top tier hero, one of the best in the game, and he is for poison teams. Now, Valbirth has been disappointing for me. I like the concept of him, which is basically he revives upon death, heals them 30% of his health, and resets the cooldown of all active abilities. Then effectively you use your ultimate nuke on a single target, refreshes his trait, which basically lets him rise again, and it's a whack-a-mole type of thing. He has other moves that does damage to all enemies plus bonus main damage, and then if you look here, he also stuns. So he has basically it's single target damage moves, and he's supposed to like kill somebody, die, kill somebody, die, kill somebody, die. Like, that's basically how it's supposed to work. It's not really working, because in order for this to work, I think what has to happen is Valbirth needs to be buffed to where it revives his character upon death and immediately takes a bonus turn. Otherwise, he doesn't do anything. He dies and then dies again, and then it's over. So that's why I don't like it. If he immediately took a bonus turn, then we would have something with this hero. I do not recommend picking him for rookie summons. Now we get to Desmond, who's recently been buffed. I think he's the only non-light dark legendary I don't own other than Cyrus, who's fusible. Enemy removes plague, 15% chance to stun them. Okay, so what this plague does? Damage based upon current health at the start of the turn. Okay, not at the end. So plague's going to be like poison, but at the start of the turn. Now, look at the basic here. it's just damage and he heals them. The other moves are going to apply plague as well, and the damage scales with how much plague you have. And then the ultimate is going to allow him to enter the plague emissary, which applies plague to the enemy at the start of their turn with a 100% chance to spraying plague to another enemy. Basically, more plague. Okay, plague drains health at the start of the turn as well when plague emissary. So he's basically another form of ignite, another form of poison. Like, he's just another damage over timer type of build, and I've heard with the buff he's supposed to actually be pretty decent, and that is going to move us over to the woodlands, some of my more favorite, because Blackhorn was the first battle pass, and even though he is a straight ripoff of World of Warcraft, they literally stole the animation from World of Warcraft for rejuvenation. However, he is a fantastic hero because he has Methasia's passive built into him, and yes, that's not as good as Methasia's passive because this same passive is for everybody, basically for Methasia team-wide, but it does double with Methasia, meaning every time that he goes with Methasia, he is very tanky. Now, if you look at the basic, it applies attack down, that's 100% of the time, so you don't have to worry about not having attack down if you have him on the team. The totem's where it gets really good because it's a 3-turn totem. Not only does heal over time, but also removes negative effects on the totem, and the totem itself has its own life pool. It can take 3 instances of damage, so normally it doesn't actually die. Now, if you look at the ultimate, this is kind of where, in my opinion, you could use a little bit of a buff. The ultimate does heal based upon his own max health, and it gives him heal over time. I feel like it could give them multiple heal over times, like 2 or 3 heal over times, and it could be better. They recently removed that and removed the debuffs from people, and they moved that to the totem, which is actually better in my personal opinion. But he is a very good hero, S tier health, and is one of the top healers in the game. A team of Brand, him and Methasia tends to be ridiculous. Now, if you look at Methasia here, why is it ridiculous with her? Well, when you have her ascended, which I do, but the basic's the same thing, recovers max health if the target has a positive effect. So basically, you get positive effect on you, and then you get a crazy amount of sustain, and that heal over time, for instance, pairs very well with the Blackhorn, so now everyone's healing like crazy. Okay, so the basic attack is really simple. You just put a shield on the lowest person's HP, basically, but it scales based upon Methasia's max HP, which is a good understanding of Methasia, because that makes it where she can build pure HP where she does have S tier in the health. She dispels debuffs on her A2, again healing off max HP, and then this one is going to heal all allies, and this is really where people like her, is it revives all allies as well. So if you have Methasia extremely tanky, especially if she's like the strong affinity against somebody you're trying to beat, it can be hard to kill her, and then automatically you know you're going to win because she's going to start reviving people. Okay, now getting into Cyrus, she's a fusible hero, going to be good in Topla. If you look at it here, every 2 turns this character's abilities attack an extra target at the end of the turn. Look at the basic, defense pierce up, so you can see why that could be quite good in Topla. He does have good defense. Looking at the A2 here, ability immune for 4 turns, 4 whole turns, okay? So you're not going to get the next negative effect on you. Now, here's the ultimate. Look at this. Attack up and then deals 240% damage to an enemy. So you get the attack up first. Now, I'm not like a massive fan of her because I don't think she's ridiculous, but she is a good single target red DPS and is used in Topla, and you can actually synthesize her, get her basically for free if you synth in some other of the epics, so that way you can actually max her out, and she does look cool. Actually, they did a good job on the animations of her. Now, moving on here to Titan Icelands. These ones are pretty simple because it's the Dwarves. Brand the Brilliance, been considered to be the best hero in the game because he was doing absolutely crazy damage to the guild boss, which has been fixed. It was a bug. Now, if you look here, invincible for a turn when he's under 50% health. So you can see it's kind of similar to how the Nicholas's work. Can be triggered once only every 3 rounds. However, it goes once every 2 rounds when ascended. So that's pretty good, right? Look at the basic here. 100% damage to an enemy, and then not only does he do 100%, but he also does damage based upon the target's max health as well, and that's true damage. If you look at the passive, gets a rage upon people taking damage, which is going to happen a lot. Character's basic ability is replaced once he have 8 rage, and that basic ability does the damage to all enemies instead of just one, and also does 20% of their max HP, and an additional 5% against bosses, and then it resets your rage until you get more rage. Now, the ultimate here is once again going to do damage to all enemies plus true damage to 10% of the target's max HP, and then applies immune to himself. So his passive is sort of the same thing as the ultimate. You're doing tons of AoE damage plus true damage, and so I could see him working really, really good with like a stun set to get constant CC while doing great damage. Now, Brand I actually like almost better because the passive continually generates shields for all team members. To all team members for 1 turn, okay, at the start of the turn. So he's going to get that fairly often, and also triggers very well with Evelyn's First Dawn, where when you get bonus turns on somebody, or if you give him a bonus turn from Mary, for instance. Basic's going to do a taunt half the time, goes up to 60%, or excuse me, 50% when booked, and then there's a 100% chance to counterattack, and that counterattack is 80% of the time going to be applying attack down. However, that's pretty good to have 80%. He removes debuffs, applies defense up and attack up. So he's effectively used almost everywhere. I mean, I've used him to pair with my Nathalia to not only give the buffs, but also with that shield passive means this happens even if Nathalia goes first, right off the bat, she's going to have a buff because this shield buff is going to happen no matter her turn. So because of that reason, I actually am a massive fan of Brand. He also pairs extremely well with Mathasia because when he's counterattacking, he's healing himself too because most of the times he has that buff as well with the shield. So great pairing with another hero under Mathasia. Now, we have the free cities where we have Tia. Tia has a conceptual problem for me. If you look at the passive, she applies Frostbite, which reduces speed, and at 4 stacks applies Frozen. Now, the problem is, okay, Frostbite, you see here, applies Frostbite to an enemy for 2 turns at the end of the enemy's turn. At 5 stacks, applies Frozen, and Frostbite 2 goes to 4 stacks, which you need the Ascension for. But her problem is that Frostbite happens at the end of the enemy's turn, meaning that if they go first, they're already going to go first, which means it's not as good in PvP unless you're having long drawn-out battles. And on offense, long drawn-out battles don't happen because after 6 rounds, you start getting lightning zapped yourself anyway. If you look at the ultimate, it's going to do damage to all enemies, but only have a 50% chance to freeze. But it's an 80% chance to freeze when they're affected by Frostbite. Well, this is also kind of bad because that means they have to go before me in order to freeze them where I would want the freeze to skip their turn. So it's conceptually a problem for me. I understand it's supposed to be like if she's on the team, she's going to be applying Frostbite, you know, continually, and the other people are taking turns and slowly gaining Frostbite. But in the reality, that has just not been what has been useful for me. And so for that reason, I would I'm not highly recommending her. Now, Yolanda, on the other hand, is a hero I've pulled a ton. I do think that she's more of an in-game hero, and I think the Ascensions may be required. Because if you look here, and she's a farmable hero through guild tokens, by the way, if you do your guild boss. At the start of the round, grants guard for a turn whenever the ally has lowest health. The guard is triggered, the remove nearest 4-turn cooldown. So basically, this is like, I'm going to save that person, okay? And guard stops the massive damage from killing them and then restores some of their health as well. So this is sort of a almost a death immunity, okay, that happens, but it's the start of every round and lasts for the turn, okay? Now, it goes, enters a 2-turn cooldown when ascended, which is why it's half the time, which is why I think she's significantly better there. Now, her ultimate ability here, the shield is very good because its scale is based upon the health loss. So when you're getting low and you need the shield the most, it becomes even stronger, and it greatly increases crit resistance, meaning you're going to receive less damage as well. It's sort of a panic button. Her A2 is all right because it applies immune and attack up to a single ally. If this was team-wide, she would be a nut job hero. And the basic just removes a negative effect from an enemy, or excuse me, from an ally while also dealing damage to an enemy. So she's overall a very good support, but it's her passive plus her ultimate that really is kind of the panic button to give people like Blackhorn and Mathasia time to heal. She pairs well with Mathasia, because places that green are good, Mathasia is going to be used as well as her, meaning somebody gets restored, gets the bonus health, gets the shield, their turn comes, they have a shield and crit rate up, so they have a buff, meaning they're getting healed from Mathasia's passive, and for that reason, I really like her. Imojin, I think, is slept on. I have her fully maxed out, but not the Ascensions. She is effectively about one thing. She gets Moonlight. Moonlight stacks Defense Pierce, but Moonlight also allows her to use Moonlight as sort of an ammunition system to attack out of turn when other people attack. I'll show you that now. When an ally attacks, launches joint attack that deals initial damage of 30%, which decreases with each bounce. This consumes 1 stack of Moonlight. So you can see she stacks up Moonlight, which also permanently stacks the Defense Pierce, which every time you get Moonlight, you get +1 up to +20 Defense Pierce. I forget the percentage exactly that is. I think it's 3% if we actually look exactly what the Moonlight is. Here, let's see what the percentage is on Moonlight. Yeah, it's +2% each, not 3%. So it's max 20 stacks, 40%. So you get 40% defense pierce, actually, which is pretty good, honestly, from having that as a permanent stack. Okay, so 40% defense pierce, but then look at this here, which this is another amazing thing. So her basic attack is like the same. It's basically the same. Deals damage to an enemy, grants 1 moonlight, plus 1 moonlight, and 30% damage per critical strike. So if she bounces and hits 4 people, for instance, 4 crits, plus 30% damage per critical strike, and plus 4 moonlight, and you get those stacks, which then can be used on the ammunition system. And then the ultimate also does AoE damage and removes positive effects from enemy, and successful removal applies moonlight too. So she is a support, but she also is really good in the stun rebel set because she attacks out of turn constantly. So you constantly, every time one of your allies attack, you have a chance to stun everyone because she's bouncing between everyone. So I think she's a little bit slept on and misunderstood. Her damage is S tier, so she can ramp and do damage over time. I just think she's going to be somebody that requires very substantial gear to be noteworthy. Okay. Now we're going to get into Evra. Evra is a hero that has recently been buffed, where once Ascension has been added, she will also apply defense down. But basically how she works is every time she gets a valid hit on an enemy, she converts the Rage, and the Rage does something similar to her ultimate, which is a bunch of just AoE damage down, but the ultimate does that, plus the attack up, okay? Now, she has basically 2 forms of basic attacks. Both this attack here and this attack here do the same thing. You're going to notice that this one here, 80% damage, but has a chance to bleed, okay? If it's affected by attack up, then launches bonus gunfire. Look at this one, 100% damage, but removes a positive effect. If affected by attack up, then launches bonus gunfire. So you can see you want the attack up, meaning you ultimate first, get attack up for 3 turns, then you use the other abilities, and depending on if you need to remove the positive effect or bleed the target, you're going to choose which basic you want to use, and that's going to trigger the bonus of the gunfire, which will stack another rage hit, which will then give you more stacks to try to get artillery support on top of it, and artillery support is basically the same thing as the ultimate, it just doesn't do quite as much damage. So, very good hero, gets better as she gets ramped, and is particularly good in places where you need multiple hits or consistent defense down. Now, we're on to the last faction, the Dragon Scale Marsh. Now, if we look at the Dragon Scales, Zitlin is a hero that you only need to pull once. You don't need Ascensions or anything, and he's all about the ultimate, and the AI works great. Basically, how he works is you apply Curse onto the boss once you get to him. The AI is smart enough not to curse normal enemies. The curse is going to double all of the damage that happens for 2 turns at the end of the curse being expired. So you apply curse, people do 100,000 damage to him, okay? Then at the end of the turn, or at the end of the 2 turns, after the end of that person's turn, the 100,000 damage gets applied again. So effectively, you can see you can use this guy paired with people who are doing poisons, people who are doing burst damage, anything like that, and that is going to give you a way to pop bosses. He has some other nice stuff, like you can see he has a shield here, converts damage into heal over time. He also has precision down, but that's not really why we're using him. Now, if you look at Savannah, she's a hero that transfers her attack when she dies to another random ally. I think she's going to be used in cheese tactics with CC and Lightwing Zachary. I've said this since beta. I think that is going to be an insane build. However, how she works is she ramps with the A3, effectively allowing her to get more and more and more revenge stacks, giving her bonus attack, and then she has S tier attack already, and then eventually she dies and gives this to another person. In practice, it doesn't really work because you don't really want the hero to die because she's doing tons of damage herself anyway, and by the time you give somebody else the damage to increase, they're going to die as well, if that makes sense, because I'm not picking her, for instance, on the wrong affinity, so she dies on purpose, so I'm 1 person down. So for that reason, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but she has a ton of mechanics that allow her to effectively crit damage up, do bonus damage, reduce the cooldown of this. The best combo I've seen so far with her is taking a Windstrex right off the bat and having Windstrex reset the ability of this over and over and over again, because they have the Windstrex bug. It was supposed to make it where Windstrex can't pick the person to reduce the cooldown, but it still can. Shh, don't tell him. Now, moving on here, the Molex. Molex is a hero I don't quite understand why everyone likes, if I'm being honest. The way he works is he has attack up, and anytime your an ally has attack up, okay, and they get attacking. So, how to put it? Let's say you have Brand that gives team-wide attack. This is the only way I can explain. Brand gives team-wide attack. All of the people on your team are then attacking. Molex now gets cooldowns because of that. So it's kind of a weird combination. Why would we care about his cooldown? Well, he has a 7-turn cooldown in order to do 200% damage to an enemy, apply attack up to all team members, which is just the normal one, and defense down on them for 1 turn. I hate mechanics where what they do is they give somebody, okay, what he does is he cooldowns all the time, but that's going to be busted. So what are we going to do? Make it where he basically has a normal cooldown by giving him a really long cooldown. I hate it when we balance stuff like this, where it's like, oh, he ramps damage, but his damage starts where he sucks. Well, then what's the point? Okay, I would rather have someone with a 3-turn cooldown with a passive that isn't just about trying to actually make him be able to use his ability. I think it's stupid in my own personal opinion. Even the other one has a 4-turn cooldown, and he has to have attack up in order to have the bonus ability land anyway. So I personally just don't like him, even though he has S-tier health, A-tier attack, A-tier defense, and he's not a bad hero because he's blue. He can give you defense down and attack up for your allies and help you in Ash. He's not as bad as I'm making him out. I just don't like the way they built this kit. Hydra to me, I think, is used for one thing and one thing only, which is AoE blue damage. I think if you're using her because you see this mechanic right here, or excuse me, this mechanic of speed down on the AoE, you misunderstand the game, because minus 30 speed is a big deal. But when you have 95 base speed, you're not going to be fast enough to go between the enemy that is 150 base speed anyway. If you have someone like a Windstrex, they're going to be infinitely faster. Therefore, the enemy is going to go first in the arena anyway and give the speed up boost, and this person's going to go last. What is the point of speed downing the enemy when you go last? I think that is a stupid mechanic. You could say it is, oh, well, next turn, maybe it changes the order. Yeah, maybe it does, but you still already ate the entire opening salvo, and that is how you lose these games. So personally, I don't like that. What I do like is that all of her abilities, including her basic attack, do AoE damage. Amazing. I think that's fantastic, okay? Her basic has a 100% damage to an enemy, but then look at the way the passive work. Attacks have a 50% chance to grant a bonus attack that deals 50% damage to all enemies. When ascended, it's an 80% damage to all enemies. So half the time, it's going to work every time, and that's why I believe she is currently good. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up every legendary hero in the game reviewed and rated. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you on the next video. Subscribe, like, and all that, because this took a half hour.